Good morning, everyone. A lot of people ask me what it's like to be a professor, so I want to talk about it in the video. I never had a real job, so it's hard for me to compare. That's the wonderful thing about life. Every single one of us has a unique experience. No one else has lived our life. So anyhow, I went for a PhD pretty early in life due to the economy at the time, 2009. I had a good resume for it. I had wonderful grades. I did well on the GMAT, which is the standardized test for graduate school for business. I did not have work experience. I did not have a master's degree, but I managed to get into Louisiana State University. They were not ranked very highly, but I really didn't care. I went ahead and went there. It was an opportunity to do a PhD at the age of 23. That would mean I would graduate when I was 27 years old and be a professor, making 6 figures. Sounded pretty good to me. So during the 4 years I was earning my PhD, you generally get some money, not a lot though. At the time it was $17,000 a year. We spent every single dollar. There was no way not to. It really wasn't enough money. So getting a PhD in business is interesting because you're not really prepared for it based on your undergraduate degree. I had calculus for business majors. I had business statistics. These are really not advanced enough. So when I showed up, I had to learn very advanced math and stats. That was a challenge. On top of that, I had to learn how to be a computer programmer. That's part of what we do in our research. You need to learn how to program. On top of that, you have to learn how to be a teacher. And no one really teaches you how to do that. They more or less, they throw you in the classroom and say, go. Now somehow, while you're doing all of this, you need to be doing your own research. That's the ultimate goal when you finish. You have to be able to do original research. It seems almost impossible, especially as I talk about it. I think back on it, I wonder, how did I do that? I learned all that, did my own research, no one taught me. I don't even understand how I did it. But I'm not unique, everyone has to do it if you want a PhD. So it really takes a huge effort over 4 years. Once I had the PhD, I started working. As I was working, I made friends with other professors in different areas, including literature, social sciences like anthropology, and engineering. My general conclusion is that being a professor is only worth it in the business school. It comes down to supply and demand. There are very, very few business school students who are prepared and motivated to earn a PhD. That means there's a low supply. Given cost and demand, that means the price goes up. In other words, they command higher salaries. You have the opposite situation in the humanities, like history and literature. So even though if you have a PhD in history, you're doing what you love, yeah, that's true, but the job situation is such that your boss are gonna make your life miserable. You don't have any market power. In other words, your boss knows that you really can't leave your job. And that very fact affects the quality of your job very much. Engineering is a little bit different. From what I gather talking to those guys, their job is so different. You know, for me, the fun part of the job is teaching, and research is a little bit less fun, but it's something to do. Service is not something I really enjoyed. Now, for engineers, they don't do any of that nearly as much as they write grants. What does that mean, writing grant? Well, for them to do their research, they need money. It's very expensive. Equipment, labs, helpers. So they have to write a grant to the NSF, maybe, National Science Foundation, or some other agency. They're literally begging for money to do their job. Their job is research, and they have to be able to convince someone their research is worth it. So they write tons of grants all year. That sounds horrible to me. I can't imagine. And think about all the wasted time. For every 100 grants that are written, probably 5 of them get funded. What a waste of manpower. So we don't have that situation in the business school. And I'm thankful for that. So anyhow, ironically enough, by doing something you don't love, in other words, accounting, you end up with a much higher job satisfaction in my case. My employers always knew I had options, and as a result of that, they treated me well. My work schedule has always been about 2 days a week for teaching, and that would mean teaching 2 classes on each of those days. Honestly, it's a lot of work when you're first starting out, but after about 3 years, it's really, really easy. You no longer need to prepare. It's all in your head. At least for me. The one thing that really takes up a lot of time for a lot of people that you don't really think about is research. Research can take up so many hours a week. You wouldn't believe it. Now, I don't know why this is, but for me, research has always come a little bit easier than most people. I mean, it may be because I really worked very, very hard early on. I built up my knowledge and practice, That may be why, or whatever, who knows, but after the first few years, I really did not spend a lot of time on research. And yet, I was able to have a pretty successful research career. So doing research is important because after 6 years, you're evaluated, and mostly on your research. If your research is good enough, they give you tenure, which means you can almost never be fired. On the other hand, if your research is not good enough, they let you go. So, many professors feel a lot of pressure about that. Now, teaching has to be the most enjoyable for me. I love connecting with the students. I love being able to explain things in a way that's very clear. And I see how much they appreciate that. And I love when they talk to me about their job offer and their career plans and what they're thinking about. I really have fun with that. Now, at the same time, there's a lot of humility that comes with teaching. You know, for me, I want to help everyone. I want to make a huge difference. But after a while, you realize something. There's a certain group of students who are going to be successful no matter what you do. There is no way to stop them. Now, they normally represent about 15% of your students. They're the all-stars. Unfortunately, there's another group that's much larger. Normally, for me, probably about 30% of students are going to do very poorly, no matter what you do. It doesn't matter how you explain it, how you format your test, any of that. They're just not going to do well. In between the two groups, you have the happy medium. And for these people, you can make a big difference in how well they perform in class and how well they retain the material. And there's also humility in that over the years, you realize that probably more than 90% of your students are not going to remember you. So you will make a difference, but not for everyone, not nearly. Another thing we do is service. We serve on committees and things like that. I don't really know anyone who loves this kind of work. It's just something you have to do. One thing very interesting is that we measure learning outcomes. We've kind of become obsessed with measuring things, quantifying things that are very hard to quantify. Everything needs to be standardized. We no longer have any trust for a professor's own judgment. There are not many essay questions in college anymore. Multiple choice has become the way to go. And a big part of that is our obsession with measuring everything. I think it's absolutely horrible. But what are you going to do? So yeah, being a business school professor, you're going to make 6 figures. You're not going to work that much unless you're at a very research-intensive university. And even then, you could just slack off, wait 6 years, they'll fire you, and then you can go work somewhere else, less research intensive. But it's definitely an investment. I mean, those 4 years I got my PhD, plus the first few years afterward, that was intense. That was a lot of work. And you never know what'll happen. You might just die at 34, right? So, I mean, you gotta consider that. No, but seriously, it's a very good life. I chose it for lifestyle reasons, and I've not been disappointed. During the past few years, I have thought about I'm not making any difference in the world via my students or my research. Obviously, no one really reads your research. And so I have had those feelings of despair that nothing I'm doing really matters. That's actually why I started the YouTube channel. That was one of the reasons. But I mean, look, I feel like lately, we all want our job to be very fulfilling and make a big difference. Maybe we should let that go. That may be too high of an expectation. Once you let that go, you make your job simply a way to make money. Maybe you'll be a lot happier. Anyhow, guys, that is my experience as a professor in the business school. Have a good one.